And I remember an actor, Nigel Bruce, once told me he was working over at Fox, and the studio had a special publicity man allocated to the Oscar Awards, Academy Awards man. And he went to this man, English actor Nigel Bruce, and said, "Who are you going to vote for?" So he named the person. He said, "Mr. So-and-so, I won't name him, wouldn't like that, you know," which was a clear threat to the man. And that's how the studios operate. To me, they're quite different. The first one's much more spontaneous. Second one is sewn up much more to satisfy what I call moronic logic in an audience. You know, they ask, those sort of audiences ask the strangest questions. Like a little boy who says to his father, "Why does thunder turn the milk sour?" and gets a cuff on the head for his pains. Because the father can't answer the question. It was a thriller, but using psychiatric motifs. And I was also intrigued by the fact of using Salvador Dali to do the dreams, because all dreams I find in movies are always blurred, slightly out of focus, or covered in smoke. And that's quite wrong, because no dreams are covered in smoke. They're extremely vivid, and a nightmare is a thing that you're glad to wake up from. So I wanted Dali because of his very sharp lines and black shadows, and this rather sort of clean-cut, endless horizon character in his work. Yes, I was going to do one once, and I'm walking along with a girl, and I'm doing, and she slaps my face. Never did it because it was publicized, and we got lots of letters from deaf mutes asking for it not to be done. So it was a shame in a way. Oh, I would say Grace Kelly, but not at first blush, you know. The whole theory is that you have to discover the sex in the woman and not have it stuck all over her like labels, you know. And there's nothing else to look for, nothing to discover. I think it belongs more or less to the Northern European type of woman. You know, the English schoolmarm who has this rather beaky face, you know, and but God help you if you get her alone somewhere. And I used to call Grace Kelly the snow-covered volcano. You remember in the film the climax was a fight on a merry-go-round. Well, that was quite a technical feat because we had to make a miniature of that and cause it to sway. And then we finally tilted the merry-go-round over the real one and cut right at the moment the miniature stopped swaying to the real one, where we dropped a lot of explosive and debris in it and so forth. I mean, the chase of Cary Grant by a crop duster in North by Northwest has been copied about 3 or 4 times since then. And that really, the invention of that particular scene came about purely by a desire to avoid the cliche, because after all, that's what one spends most of one's time doing, avoiding the cliche. Now this is the cliche scene of putting a man on the spot, sending him to a certain place, and eventually somebody will shoot at him or somewhere, you know. So one began to wonder how to avoid this cliche, which usually took the form of a man standing under a street lamp at night, the cobbles washed down by the recent rains, a cat slithering by along the foot of a wall, and a curtain pulled aside at a window, and then the car would come along, the limousine. So I decided, I said, no, none of those things. Let's have surroundings where there are no trees, houses, or anything. So the audience will then wonder, well, where can the menace come from? And that's how one arrived at that particular scene. Well, the first example that comes to mind naturally is Psycho. There I deliberately made the film in black and white because I knew that if it had been in colour, the draining away of blood would have been too repulsive. And it was for that particular reason that it was made in black and white.
But
No other reason.
Are there not other reasons as well? I mean, in dramatic form?
Well, there's always the basic, that is not to use colour until you need it.
When Psycho, I suppose Psycho is one of, again, your most famous and yet notorious films. When it first came out, I remember the critics gave it a heck of a going over.
I expected that.
You did?
Oh, yes. I told the Paramount people in New York, I said, you know, this film is going to be panned like anything. So I suggest you send a man over to London and double the advertising appropriation. What you usually spend on a picture, double it, because this picture will get it. The reason it got it is because I laid down a rule that no critic should see it without an audience. I knew they'd object to that, but as we've carried out that policy in every other country, I didn't see why we should make the exception here.
Why did you make that rule, Mr. Hitchcock?
Well, there were two reasons. First of all, people often go in the middle of a picture. And I also made the rule that no one can go into the movie in the middle of it. They thought it was a stunt, a trick, and it wasn't at all. The reason was because the leading lady, Janet Leigh, was killed off a third of the way through. And I didn't want people whispering to each other, when is Janet Leigh coming on? Because then that would have distracted them from the story. And that was my reason for insisting on going in at the beginning and critics to see it with an audience to get the reaction.